Hey everybody, can you see me? I'm trying to figure out all this new fancy technology. Just trying to figure it all out. Right? So now I believe we are live on YouTube, yes, and now we're live on Facebook, and now we are live on Rockfin. Look at that. Look at that. We are live everywhere. All right. We are live on Facebook. We are live on YouTube. And we are live on Rockfin. Look at that. Look at that. We are live everywhere. Everywhere bicycles are broken. Yes, we apparently are live. So there we go. I think we are live. Let me just quickly send an email and make sure we are live. Live. Is it working? Right. I'm sorry to bug you with all this technological babble, but streaming on multiple platforms is not the most easy thing in the world. So thank you for your patience, everyone. I have never done it. I should have labeled this one as an experimental live because that's kind of what it is. That is kind of what it is. So there we go, folks. I'm so glad you're here with us tonight. Welcome, 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 welcome. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to hit the notifications bell. Always good to hit that notifications bell. We have got so much to talk about tonight, so many things to discuss here with all of you. Yeah, what a great night. A lot going on in the world that we can be concerned about, and we will certainly get to that. We will absolutely, positively, certainly get to that. We will certainly, definitely get to that. We will get to that. But here we are. We will get to that, but here we are. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Always important to hit that notifications bell. Always important to hit the notifications bell. And yeah, here we are. Here we are. Here we are. So yes, we are live. We are live. I'm seeing us live, and we are live. And I'm sorry for all this confusion, but we're doing the best we can. So if you want to join the Rockfin channel, I'm just throwing this out there. Might as well while we're talking about it. On the Rockfin channel, I'm going to start doing an exclusive show every at least once a week is the plan. But every few days, hopefully, but definitely once a week, I'm going to start doing an exclusive show on Rockfin called Named Trend Analysis. So stay tuned for that. If you want to get involved in the Rockfin, there's a link for the Rockfin. We're doing main trend analysis on Rockfin as our exclusive show. And we're streaming. Now we're on YouTube, we are on Facebook, and we are on Rockfin all at the same time. What a wonderful night it is. So thank you, everyone, for your patience with me and getting through those technical difficulties there at the beginning. Not ever done all three platforms at once, but it's happening. It's happening, and we're rolling, and times are good. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Plenty that we can discuss. Now, the way this show generally works, the way it works on these YouTube streams and Facebook streams and Rockfin streams, is I give my opening remarks, and my opening remarks are followed by a roll call where I call you all out as I see you, your names and locations. We find out who it is on the other side of the camera. And then after that, after I call you out as I see you names and locations, after that, then I answer your super chat questions for the rest of the night. And that's one thing that a lot of people find really fun about this show. I found out over the years, people really like that I answer people's super chat questions, right? That I just, I play 20 questions. People ask me about obscure books. People ask me about what foods I like to eat. People ask me deep, insightful philosophical questions. and I do the best of my ability to give you an answer. Now, it's not always the answer that you want, and I can't answer everything. There are some places where I just won't go, but for the most part, I will indeed answer your questions. So there you go. So I guess with no further ado, I will get into my opening remarks. But as I do that, keep in mind that if a super chat question comes through, if a super chat question comes through, I will type it. I won't be writing it down. I used to write them down, not anymore. Now I type it. So I will type it and then I will answer it in the second half of the show. So if you have something you want me to talk about in the second half of the show after I finish my opening remarks, all you have to do is send it to me as a super chat question. I will see it come in. And then after that, I will type it and I will answer it in the second half of the show. So this is very, very exciting. This is the first time we've ever streamed on Rockfin, and this is a late night chat, and we are having a great time. So welcome everybody. Welcome Rockfin audience. Welcome YouTube audience. Welcome Facebook audience. I see people I know. I see people I don't know, and it's awesome. It's really, truly tremendous. Yeah, it's really, really great. So welcome everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right. So obviously the concern that is on most of our minds, if we've paid attention to this, is the danger of World War III. It just doesn't seem to go away. Just doesn't seem to go away. The White House seems like they're backing away from it. Every so often, it seems like they're backing away, and then it just keeps heating up. They will not give us a break. They will not let our hearts stop racing. What do we got here? Does the resentment so many of Americans have towards work implications when it comes to building socialism, growing the production? Okay, resentment have towards work. All right, wrote it down, and we'll answer that in the second half of the show. But no, today, as you saw, Russia came forward and said, Hinkle-Cedar debate. We'll definitely talk about that. Said that basically their security guarantees that they asked for from the United States were not addressed. There was that meeting that took place, and they asked for certain security guarantees from the United States, and they didn't get any of them addressed. Oh, aggression. Writing them down as they come in, and that's how the second half of the show works. But they didn't get any of them addressed. Meanwhile, there was a phone call between Ukrainian President Zelensky and Joe Biden. And there are now differing opinions about what was said on that phone call. CNN has retracted some of its statements. Some are claiming one version of events is that Joe Biden said that in February there would definitely be an invasion and that Kiev would be ransacked. And then we also have another version that, the United States is warned about a possible invasion by Russia, but we basically have two different versions of this phone call. So while the United States is talking about sending troops to Ukraine and is piling lethal weapons into Ukraine right on Russia's border, we have differing opinions at this point about why that happened. Not a good situation. Do you think China and Russia will eventually breach the Anglosphere industry with English-speaking news? Okay. Russia, China, breach Anglosphere with English-speaking news? Question. All right, wrote it down. But we've got that situation happening where it seems like Ukraine and the United States are not even on the same page. It's worth noting, and this isn't being brought up in mainstream U.S. media. It's not being talked about. We've got Neil Fraser here. What's your take on the special relationship between the USA and the UK? All right. Um, and not being talked about, but there are already roughly 200 U.S. National Guard in Ukraine, but they're not there as combatants. The official version of events is that they are there as essentially instructors. They are training the Ukrainian military. They are training the Ukrainian military as instructors, is what we are being told. They are not combatants. So we have that happening. The 200 US soldiers already in Ukraine, just non combatants, instructors. They're teaching the Ukrainians how to fight. Reports indicate they may be teaching this Azov battalion, this neo Nazi battalion they've got. Of course, mainstream media is certainly not highlighting that. The USA has just unloaded some Javelin anti-tank missiles into Ukraine. That's happened. Estonia is bringing weapons into Ukraine. The Germans are only sending helmets. They will not send lethal weapons to Ukraine, only helmets. Uh, Dick Spencer siding with the left, attacking you. I think you mean, Richard Spencer. Oh, yeah, we'll talk about that. That's an amusing turn of events. So we have that situation, and I ranted about it the last time I was on here. I ranted and raved and waved my arms, and I'm still in the situation of what do we have to gain as a country from this? What is there to gain from the United States? Threatening Russia, piling lethal weapons into Ukraine, and how the situation, as I explained it to somebody earlier tonight, is completely bonkers. Russia has no intention of invading Ukraine, has made clear they don't want to invade Ukraine. However, they've also made clear they don't want lethal weapons on their border. They don't want there to be U.S. troops or NATO expansion or U.S. military hardware on their border. So now the United States announces to the world, oh, Russia's planning to invade Ukraine, and pours more lethal weapons into the country. And Russia has said, no, this is a security guarantee. We don't want to be crossed. So if you do this, we're going to have to respond. And then the USA says, see, they're threatening to invade Ukraine even more. And then they pour in more weapons. And it is a really stupid trap. It's almost like the Cuban Missile Crisis. There doesn't seem to be a way out, right? Both sides are pushing this as far as they possibly can. The United States seems just determined to threaten Russia in Ukraine, to try and provoke a response from Russia. Russia doesn't want to respond. Russia has made clear it has no intentions of invading Ukraine. This is all a very disturbing situation. And it seems like it's going to cool. And then Biden says something else or does something else stupid. And I mean, it seemed like it was cooling down. And then yesterday afternoon, Joe Biden, while he was shopping, he was like in a clothing store. He announced he was thinking about sending U.S. troops to Ukraine and that he had U.S. troops on high alert ready to go to Ukraine. And then it looked like things were calling down. And now we hear about this crazy phone call between Zelensky and Biden where nobody agrees on what was actually said on this phone call. And furthermore, we find out that none of the guarantees that Russia asked for in the meeting were met. The USA did not make public the document they gave to Russia. Russia's come forward and said, yeah, none of the things we asked for in our meeting about security guarantees, about NATO not expanding, none of those things were met. And so basically, our interactions haven't given us anything, and we are still now on the brink. When is this going to end? When is this going to end? I mean, and what was said to Zelensky? I mean, was Zelensky called up on the phone and told that there's an invasion on the brink, or was he just told, "Oh, we think"? I mean, what was said to Zelensky, and why do the White House and the Ukrainians have a very different version of what happened? Why are we not getting a clear picture from the media about what actually happened? This was one phone call between two leaders. There were not two phone calls or not three phone calls. It was one phone call between the president of Ukraine and the president of the United States. And on that phone call, there were words exchanged. What were those words? Can we be clear about what they were? Another one. Can you talk about the differences MLM and third worldism? All right. Okay. Differences between MLM and third worldism. All right. So that's that situation. Meanwhile, again, we're worried about a war between two great powers. We're worried about war between Russia and the United States. We're worried about NATO expansion and Russia, and we're worried about that. Meanwhile, there's another war happening about, pretty far south of there in Yemen. And that war has been going on for the past 6 or 7 years, and it's been intensifying. And that war has recently intensified. And the people of Yemen are resisting Saudi domination, and that war is intensifying. And that's not getting any press in the United States, but that war is getting more intense, and people are dying. And that confrontation is definitely happening. And there's been rocket attacks, and the people of Yemen, they should be the heroes of the entire world right now. This is one of the poorest countries in the world, one of the poorest countries on earth, is standing up to the fourth largest military budget in the world. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has the fourth largest military budget in the world, and they are unloading death and destruction onto their neighbor to the south, Yemen. They are just unloading death and destruction. They are killing people. They're bombing hospitals. They're bombing schools. They're preventing people's access to health care. And the Yemeni people continue to resist, and they continue to protest, and they continue to raise arms and resist. And the Yemeni people should be the hero of the whole world. This is the Vietnam of our time. This is what's happening in Yemen. I mean, hundreds of thousands of Yemenis have been killed. Everything in the world has been thrown at them. But yet, led by Ansar Allah, aka the Houthis, led by the Southern movement that wants to restore the Democratic People's Republic of Yemen, led by the Arab Spring Party, led by the Salah movement and Arab nationalists. They continue resisting. They continue resisting this onslaught. And the USA doesn't know what to do. Joe Biden has promised that he will end the war in Yemen. He will end the war in Yemen. But yet he's still giving Saudi Arabia weapons. He says he's only giving them defensive weapons. But, it's pretty clear that the weapons that are being given to Saudi Arabia are being turned against the Yemeni people. The British are arming the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and they're complicit in this as well. But yet the Yemeni people continue to resist. These are a tribal people, right? A lot of them are Bedouin. They live in the mountains, and these are Zaidi Shia Muslims from the Ansar Allah group. Some of these are socialists and leftists from the urban centers and Sana'a. These are folks who want to restore the DPRY, the Democratic People's Republic of Yemen. Half of Yemen used to be a socialist, Marxist-Leninist government. These are people who want to bring it back. There's Arab nationalists, Nasserists, and Baathists that are involved. And every major party in Yemen has divided over this, mind you. Right? There are a number of Baathists who support Saudi Arabia, but there's a number of Baathists who don't. And there's some in the Yemeni Socialist Party that support Saudi Arabia, and there's some who don't. And there's some some in the secular parts of Yemen that support Saudi Arabia, and some who don't. Every major party in Yemeni society has been sliced down the middle. These popular assemblies and revolutionary councils that the Houthis have built are the basis of this revolution. And they have a huge amount of support in local communities. The people are rallying behind the Ansar Allah group. And as a result of that, the resistance continues. And then they want to tell us that this is all just a proxy war with Iran, we are told. It's a proxy war with Iran. This is all an Iranian conspiracy, and that's malarkey. That's complete malarkey. Because if that was the case, it would have been over in 5 years. It would have been over in 6 years. Or it would have been over in 1 year. It would have been over in a week. But the fact that they continue to resist, to boldly resist in the face of all of this, indicates that there is a mass popular base of support for Ansar Allah and for the popular resistance, for the Revolutionary Committee. And the people of Yemen are fighting back. And, there you go. Did China really support Saudi Arabia against Yemen? We'll talk about that. That's a distortion. We'll talk about that. Support Saudi against Yemen. So we have that situation that is taking place in the world. We've all forgotten about West Elm Caleb. Remember West Elm Caleb? We were all talking about West Elm Caleb. That was the big social media story over the weekend. I think we've all kind of forgotten about that. What else is new, folks? What else are we talking about? Well, the Venezuelan opposition, as you have seen, has failed at this point, has completely failed to get enough petitions in for a recall against Maduro. So the potential to recall Maduro is not happening. So we have that. We have Xiomara Castro, the socialist president, being sworn in Honduras. 2009, Honduras had a coup by the United States where the elected president, Manuel Zelaya, was toppled. And now in Honduras, after over a decade of instability and conflict, we now have a situation where finally the people of Honduras have been allowed to re-elect a socialist leader. Xiomara Castro has been sworn in. So that's happening, right? And that's a big deal. Honduras has lived under neoliberalism. 2009, when their socialist leader was toppled, that opened the floodgates. They had one of the highest murder rates in the world. I think they had the second highest murder rate in the world after Haiti. And then at one point, they had the highest murder rate in the world. And Honduras has been just devastated by neoliberalism, free market policies, etc. And now it seems that a socialist president has been sworn in Honduras. Now, another interesting bit of information that people may not be aware of is there's a Supreme Court justice stepping down. So Joe Biden now has to pick a new Supreme Court justice. Right? He has to pick a new Supreme Court justice. How is it that all these things are happening at once? You know, we're having the brink of war with Russia, the Ukraine situation, this new Cuban Missile Crisis in Eastern Europe. And then to top it off, we've got the war in Yemen intensifying. We have Xiomara Castro being sworn in as president of Honduras. We have, Maduro's recall attempt being overturned. And to top it all off, we now have an opening or a vacancy on the U.S. Supreme Court. And they're talking about making Kamala Harris, the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, a Supreme Court justice. I saw that and I went, I think the fast disappearance of the West End Caleb story is just one sign that people are waking up to MSN manipulation. Oh, that's a good thing. We'll write that down. Waking up. And I saw that they're talking about putting Kamala Harris on the U.S. Supreme Court. And I thought about that for a minute. Now, to be clear, let me just be clear. I have written a book about Kamala Harris. I have studied Kamala Harris. I followed her career. Kamala Harris is dangerous. She's dangerous. She doesn't belong in the vice presidency. She doesn't belong in the Supreme Court. And she absolutely doesn't belong in the presidency of the United States. That said, why is there any talk of putting her on the U.S. Supreme Court? Why? Why on earth would they be thinking about putting Kamala Harris on the Supreme Court? Have you ever heard of talk of appointing the vice president to the Supreme Court? Has that ever been brought up before? No, they generally appoint federal judges, legal scholars. They don't generally appoint vice presidents. Doesn't happen. So why on earth is there any talk of putting Kamala Harris on the Supreme Court? Well, you should go and read my book, Kamala Harris and the Future of America. Folks, if Kamala Harris gets on the Supreme Court, that is a lifetime appointment. She never retires. She never steps down. And she would leave the vice presidency. And she'd have to be replaced by another vice president. She would leave the vice presidency. And she would never be president. She would never be president. And that is what is going on here. And I have explained this before, and it's hard for people to understand. But if you read my book, Kamala Harris and the Future of America, it makes it very, very, very clear. Right? There is a faction in the ruling class of the United States that is trying to shove Kamala Harris down our throats. Nobody likes Kamala Harris. She got less than 1% of the vote in the Democratic primary. Tulsi Gabbard got more votes than Kamala Harris did. Tulsi Gabbard was declared fringe, declared an Assad supporter, an agent of Russia in mainstream US media, but she still got more votes than Kamala Harris did. Kamala Harris is a very unlikable person. She's a criminal prosecutor who destroyed the lives of thousands of people for victimless crimes like smoking marijuana. When she was the California Attorney General, she tried to put an innocent man to death. An innocent man. She tried to put him to death. And, she didn't want DNA evidence to be admitted when she was going to execute this person. She tried to block DNA evidence in order to keep somebody on death row because she wanted to fry a bastard. She just really wanted to fry a bastard, right? I mean, that's the kind of person that Kamala Harris is, right? She wanted to execute an innocent man, and she wanted to block DNA evidence to make it happen. So that was going on, right? Oh, and thank you, Jenny, for the tip. Originally came because of Jimmy Dore, and now we get Caleb. So cool. Looking forward to the show. Well, thank you, Jenny. That's very kind of you. I really do appreciate that. We are on Rockfin right now, so there you go. First night on Rockfin. Still getting the hang of it. Forgive me if it's a little bit sloppy, folks, but yeah, first night on Rockfin, and here we go. So Kamala Harris, as I was saying, not a very nice person. She's got quite a messy background as a prosecutor in California. She bragged on video about locking up the parents of truant children. Kids, you're truant from school. Kamala Harris puts their parents in jail. Kamala Harris, she makes fun of anti-mass incarceration protesters. There's a video of her marching around the stage, mocking people that say, build more schools, less jails. And she has this sarcastic, mocking voice. Build more schools, less jails. Build more schools, less jails. Well, you still haven't figured out why I have to have 5 padlocks on my door. She hates people that question mass incarceration. Kamala Harris is a very dangerous narcissist. Very dangerous narcissist. She feels that she is a victim. She feels that the world doesn't understand how badly she has suffered in her life. She feels she's been mistreated, and she probably has. Let's be real. I'm not denying that. Regardless, Kamala Harris is very dangerous. But Kamala Harris has made friends with the Silicon Valley crowd. There was a meeting in Long Island, New York, in the lead up to the 2020 presidential elections. And all of the people, not all of them, but many of the top backers of Hillary Clinton decided to put their money behind Kamala Harris. There was a meeting in Long Island. This was reported on in the press, that a meeting took place, and behind closed doors, the Hillary Clinton Silicon Valley faction put their money behind Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris represents the people who ran the US State Department from 2009 until 2013. And so much damage was done during that time, you wouldn't believe it. Right? The time that Hillary Clinton ran the US State Department, the USA overthrew the government of Honduras and created a refugee crisis in that country, caused thousands and thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of people to flee Honduras and become refugees on our border. The USA manipulated the events of the Arab Spring, in Syria and Libya. The most prosperous country on the African continent, Libya, was bombed and destroyed. When it was a socialist country, the oil wealth was used to raise people out of poverty. People were trying to get into Libya to get some of that oil wealth. But now Libya is so bad that a lot of it doesn't have electricity. People are fleeing on rafts in the Mediterranean trying to get out. And there's slave markets. It's a disaster. Hey, Caleb signed up for CPI. When can I hear back? All right. When do I hear back? Write it down. Thanks, Alex. So we got that going on. She created a civil war in Syria, fomenting the population of Syria. There was a protest as part of the Arab Spring, and then all of a sudden, Islamic extremists from Jordan and Qatar and other places were shipped into the country, and Syria has been reduced to civil war, massive refugee crisis, mass death. The world is still shaking from the horrendous things that were done by the Hillary Clinton State Department. And Hillary Clinton did these things in coordination with Silicon Valley. We know from a report published in the New Yorker magazine as Barack Obama was leaving office that one of the very key people in Hillary Clinton's State Department was Jared Andrew Cohen, not Jared Cohen from the Trump world, Jared Andrew Cohen. Jared Andrew Cohen was on the board of Google Alphabet, and he worked for the US State Department as their liaison with Silicon Valley. And Jared Andrew Cohen went to Twitter on behalf of the US State Department and told them to change the way they were operating, to change what they were doing, in order to cause unrest in Iran. And, to support protests in Iran, to cause instability in Iran. He told her what to do, basically. Start a CPI club at your university. And so because of that, Barack Obama heard about this and was furious because he had never approved Jared Andrew Cohen going to Twitter and telling them what to do in order to foment unrest in Iran and cause protests and instabilities in Iran. So he tried to fire Jared Andrew Cohen, and Hillary Clinton stepped in and said, no, you can't. And Hillary Clinton protected Jared Andrew Cohen. Constitution. Protected Jared Andrew Cohen. And we know that during the whole Arab Spring, Facebook, Twitter, in coordination with Al Jazeera, which is based in Qatar, they did everything they could to cause as much instability and unrest and to manipulate the Arab Spring for geopolitical purposes. That's what was done. Well, the results have been pretty bad. And Barack Obama, you'll remember, got rid of Hillary Clinton at the State Department and replaced her with John Kerry. And that John Kerry, he wasn't the best. He didn't do very many good things, except he kind of focused more on soft power. He signed the Iran nuclear deal. He established diplomatic relations with Cuba. He ended the war in Colombia and, oversaw the negotiations in Cuba between the FARC and the Colombian government. He actually went and met with the FARC rebels and visited those negotiations and aided it. So John Kerry is more of your classic old school Cold War liberal. He's all about soft power manipulation. But Hillary Clinton and her State Department faction, they're a group of people that believe that it is their duty to foment unrest and destruction around the world. And they used the US State Department and they used Facebook, Twitter, and Silicon Valley to foment unrest in 2011, to turn, the economic crisis into a wave of death, destruction, and instability that spread throughout the Middle East and had very catastrophic results. So that's what happened. And they wanted Hillary Clinton to run again. They very much wanted Hillary Clinton to be president so she could not be obstructed by a Barack Obama, not be obstructed by a Donald Trump or anyone who might get in her way, and use the White House to spread this global catastrophe, to spread instability across the planet. And it's pretty clear that there were many people in the Democratic Party and many people in the Republican Party who did not want Hillary Clinton to run again and did not want Hillary Clinton to get the presidency in order to do this. And so the people who were backing Hillary Clinton, the people on Silicon Valley, the people who, you can read The Aquarian Conspiracy by Marilyn Ferguson, a very important text. She's tied to the Stanford Research Institute. This is, in the 80s when they were building Silicon Valley. This was the occult guru who was kind of the advisor to all of them. You can read what she wants, a global movement of transformation, They want a great global explosion to correct things in the world. Very scary stuff. And these folks picked Kamala Harris as their candidate. And Kamala Harris was their pick. The Hillary Clinton faction, the Silicon Valley fascists, the Silicon Valley, I don't know what you want to call them, this weird primitivist, violence and terrorism, permanent revolution faction in the US State Department picked Kamala Harris as their candidate. And Tulsi Gabbard used her limited time on the debate stage to go after Kamala Harris and expose her record. Kamala Harris wasn't picked. And then Joe Biden did everything he possibly could not to pick Kamala Harris as his running mate. He made a promise that it would be a black woman who would be his running mate. And he set a date in which he would announce this candidate. And between that time, he did everything possible not to pick Kamala Harris. He floated the name Karen Bass from obscurity. Karen Bass was this obscure, member of the House of Representatives in Los Angeles that no one's ever heard of. And he picked her from obscurity. He said, maybe I'll do her. And then U.S. media exposed that she had visited Cuba. Somebody just happened to pass on information that back in 1970, she went on a trip to Cuba. So it couldn't be her, right? She must be a communist. And then the date that Joe Biden set for when he would announce his vice presidential nominee came. And he didn't say anything. And it was 10 days after the date he set that the Democratic National Convention schedule was published. And Kamala Harris was listed on that Democratic National Convention schedule. She was listed separate from the vice presidential nominee, meaning that it was not Kamala Harris. And that convention was that schedule was published, and everyone saw that, and they said, wow, Kamala Harris is not going to be the VP pick of Joe Biden. And so then Kamala Harris unfollowed Joe Biden on Twitter. And then 6 hours later, they came forward and said, yep, Kamala Harris is the VP pick. But it gets better. Folks, we all know Joe Biden's a pervert, okay? Joe Biden, there's lots of video evidence of how creepy and inappropriate he is with underage girls. Many women come forward and said he sexually assaulted them. Tara Reid has been, come forward and said she was raped by Joe Biden. And I believe Tara Reid. I think she is telling the truth. I believe Tara Reid. And Joe Biden is a pervert. Joe Biden is a sexual predator. That's just a fact. Okay, Joe Biden is a sexual predator, and there's no denying it. He has on video inappropriately touched a number of underage girls when he's posing for pictures with them. You can watch the videos for yourself. Many women have come forward and talked about how inappropriately he's touched them, and Tara Reid, his former staffer, has come forward and talked about how he raped her. Joe Biden is a pervert. Joe Biden is a sexual predator. There is no question about it. Okay, there is no question about it. There's no question about it. I mean, look at the videos for yourself. Woman after woman after woman has come forward. I believe Tara Reid. I think he's a rapist. But maybe you don't believe Tara Reid. If you don't believe Tara Reid, look at the video for yourself. He's a pervert. He's a sexual predator. That's a fact. Okay, this is a fact. You cannot dispute this, that Joe Biden is a sexual predator. It is an undisputed fact. And Kamala Harris made it very clear that she also believes that Joe Biden is a sexual predator. When she was campaigning, she was asked about the sexual assault allegations against Joe Biden, and she said that she believed the women who came forward. She said that she believes the women who accused Joe Biden. Now, she didn't say she believes Tara Reid in particular. She didn't say which women she believed, but she said she believed the accusers in general. That's what Kamala Harris said. That's what Kamala Harris said. When Kamala Harris accepted the vice presidential nomination of Joe Biden, she never retracted those words. Not once did she ever retract those words. She never said, well, I don't think Joe would do that. No. She never said, oh, I was wrong. No, I've changed my opinion about Joe. Never once has she retracted her belief that Joe Biden's accusers were telling the truth. But if you listened to her campaign speech, that her acceptance speech at the Democratic National Convention, she's standing there, she's getting through her speech. She talked about all the people she's put in jail and how she's a prosecutor, and she said, quote, "I know a predator when I see one." That's what she said in her speech. "I know a predator when I see one," meaning that she stands by her words. Now, if you listen to the speech, you might have thought it was about Trump. Wrong, because it was followed by an awkward pause. There was this dead silence in the room where she just looked at the camera and she said, "I know a predator when I see one," meaning I still believe the women, Joe. I've got something on you. And you almost didn't nominate me, Joe, but I twisted your arm and I got into this position. Joe Biden did everything possible to not nominate Kamala Harris. And he obviously had picked someone else. And then last minute, Kamala Harris was picked. And in her speech, she made clear that she still believes his accusers. This is big. This is very, very big. This is very, very big. And now Kamala Harris is one heart attack away from being president. All it takes is for Sleepy Joe to, have a heart attack or finally admit he's got dementia, which everyone else knows he's got, and then she's president. So why in the world would there be any talk of putting her on the Supreme Court? Because it's the only way to keep her out of the presidency, and it would keep her out of the presidency for life. And there are a lot of people behind closed doors that know how dangerous Kamala Harris is. Kamala Harris is a very, very, very dangerous person. You want to know how dangerous Kamala Harris is? Ask yourself, what kind of person laughs about locking up the parents of truant school children? What kind of person mocks people that protest, the people that want more schools and less jails? And she's on video laughing at them. Build more schools, less jails. Build more schools, less jails. She hates them with a passion. Kamala Harris tried to keep an innocent man on death row, tried to block DNA evidence. She didn't want the innocent man to be exonerated. She wanted his blood. She wanted to kill a bastard. She wanted to fry somebody. That's what she wanted. That's a demented, demented person. And if you want to understand the demented mindset of Kamala Harris, you have to listen, you have to look at the way she operates. Right? The fact that what was the big line out of her debate? She said, "That little girl was me." Right? She described how offended she was by Joe Biden having taken a bad position on school busing. And she said, there was one little girl who was the first in her class, in the first class to integrate schools in Berkeley, and that little girl was me. And then they started printing T-shirts of Kamala as a 10-year-old Kamala Harris. They had T-shirts with a 10-year-old face on them. Kamala Harris invokes her childhood in almost every speech she gives. She talks about what, at some point, when she was talking about locking up the truant school children, she's like, "I wouldn't have been anywhere if it weren't for my education." And when she's talking about, accepting the vice presidential nomination, "Oh, my mother raised us," and it's all about her childhood. It's all about her childhood. Vote for her because she was once a very cute, adorable small child. That is the message, right? We are supposed to think of Kamala, who is well over 40 years old. We're supposed to think of Kamala Harris like an adorable 10-year-old child who's so innocent, and why can't we just make her president? That's because Kamala Harris is constantly flashing images of traumatic events from her childhood in her mind, right? Now, we don't know what happened. We don't know what happened, right? We do know that she and her father are estranged, that her father did not attend her inauguration as vice president in Washington, D.C. Her father who is an economics professor of Jamaican heritage, taught at Stanford. He's now retired and living in Jamaica. That her father basically came out and denounced her campaign. And he wrote this cryptic essay, Reflections of a Jamaican Father, where he basically, talked about how sad it was he didn't get to have an influence on her. Um, Donald Harris, Kamala Harris's father, doesn't like Kamala Harris and vice versa. And she never talks about it. So her father doesn't like her and didn't raise her. She was raised by her mother. She idealizes her mother. Her mother's like a saint, but her father doesn't exist. Something's going on there, right? And she's talked about some of the things, right? We know about, neighbors wouldn't play with her because they were black when she was a kid. She was one of the first to integrate a school. Okay. We also know she spent a long time in Montreal, and she never talks about that. She spent her teen years living in Canada. In Canada, what the hell was she doing? She never talks about this. There's like this lost decade where she lived in, in Quebec, right? I mean, she never talks about that, but Kamala Harris sees herself as a victim. She thinks about whatever happened to that little girl, Kamala. Whatever happened to Kamala, it was unfair, and it probably was. I mean, what happened to her must have been very horrible. We don't know what it was. Something happened to her. It was very horrible, and she's very angry about it. She's very angry about it, and she wants the world to understand how badly she's been treated. She wants revenge. She wants the world to, she wants the world to see how powerful she is, that nobody can mess with her. She can lock people up. She can, give people lethal injection and kill them even if they didn't commit the crime. She can put people away. She can destroy people. Listen to Kamala when she starts yelling. Listen to when she starts yelling, right? Listen to the voice that she gets, right? It's kind of an agitational voice. It can be very cheering, but listen to that voice she uses when she starts yelling about Donald Trump shook hands with Kim Jong-un for a photo op. That's not the voice of somebody who just is filled with righteous outrage. This is the voice of someone who wants to kill. Kamala Harris wants to kill. She wants to kill. She wants there to be dead bodies that she created. I mean, this is an extreme, dangerous person, right? And, everyone loves to call everyone a psychopath nowadays. Kamala Harris is not a psychopath. Psychopaths aren't like this. Psychopaths lack real emotions. Psychopaths don't care, right? They're self-interested and they don't care. Kamala Harris cares more than anybody. She has this huge ego and this huge victim complex. The world has been so unfair to her. The world has treated her so badly, and she has worked so hard to get where she is, and now she is going to make the world pay for what it did to her. She's a very, 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 dangerous person. And there's a lot of people who realize this. Tulsi Gabbard realized this. Many Republicans realized this. Many people in the Pentagon realized this. And I'm convinced that even there's probably people around Joe Biden who realize this. And now more reports confirming what I wrote in my book are coming out. Her staff are all coming forward and quitting. People are quitting from her staff. Why are they quitting? Because she subjects them to soul-wrenching criticism. What kind of person subjects people to soul-wrenching criticism? A narcissist, right? What kind of person won't take prep for interviews? A narcissist. Well, she knows it all, right? Why would Kamala Harris be prepped for an interview? She knows it all, right? She refuses to be prepped for interviews. She subjects her staff to soul-wrenching criticism. And around Capitol Hill, nobody wants to hire somebody who has worked with Kamala Harris. They don't want to hire Harris people because they are considered to be toxic. She's the worst boss you've ever had. Exactly. Kamala Harris is a very dangerous person. And she's the kind of person who's been groomed by the Silicon Valley fascists. This grouping, the Jared Andrew Cohens of the world, the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, they have figured out how to push certain people's buttons. Wait, Kamala Harris is doing struggle sessions. Haha. They figured out how to push her buttons. And they know just how to manipulate her. They know exactly how to get her to unleash destruction across the planet. They know what they're doing. They know exactly what they are doing. And if she gets into the White House, she will unleash death and destruction on the world, right? It'll be the Arab Spring like you've never seen. Barack Obama was trying to stop what the State Department was doing during the Arab Spring. It'll be the Arab Spring with no Barack Obama to hold it back. It'll be an apocalyptic explosion of chaos and death fomented by Silicon Valley with nobody to get in their way. We can't let Kamala Harris be president. Now, it appears that some of the people who recognize how dangerous Kamala Harris are trying to get her on the Supreme Court as a way of keeping her from being president. Right? The narrative that I laid out in my book, Kamala Harris and the Future of America, becomes more true every single day. The staffers come out, told you, sadistic narcissist, victim complex. I told you, right? And now they're trying to put her on the Supreme Court. Who ever heard of a vice president being put on the Supreme Court? Does that happen? Well, yes, apparently it does, because that would bar her from the presidency. And certain people realize that having her as president is extremely dangerous. I'm telling you, folks, there is a logic. There is a logic to what I'm saying. So, I mean, that's what's going on with Kamala Harris on the Supreme Court. And Joe Biden won't let it go with Russia. But at this point, Biden's probably saying, okay, is it enough, guys? He's sitting there with his foreign policy advisors and others, and he's saying, all right, can we get on with this? Because at this point, France is going to meet with Russia on their own. The Germans are not allowing any lethal weapons to be transported through Germany to get to Ukraine. Croatia will quit NATO if this war happens. The head of the German Navy resigned over this, right? The top German Navy boss stepped down and said that, that Crimea belongs to Russia, and that this is not rational. Folks, is Jen Psaki one of the Kamala Harris people? They seem to have similar personalities. I wouldn't say that, no. Jen Psaki is different. She's different. But I'm telling you, Biden is on his own at this point. Europe ain't buying it. The British, maybe. The British, they supported Bush's invasion of Iraq, but the mainland of Europe, France, Germany, Belgium, they're not buying this. Croatia certainly isn't buying this. This is about driving the price of natural gas up in this exceptionally cold winter, making sure that Russia doesn't get in on the natural gas markets of Europe. Look, now Biden's going to put sanctions on Nord Stream 2, he said. Right? It's about killing that Nord Stream 2 pipeline. It's about making money for weapons manufacturers, right? Because they're going to start selling more weapons to the NATO countries and sending weapons around, right? These helicopters, these 5 military helicopters they just unloaded in Ukraine, where did they come from? They came from Afghanistan, right? Well, there you go. And in fact, they were already in Ukraine for repairs. They moved them from Afghanistan to Ukraine for repairs, and now they're just kind of giving them to Ukraine, meaning that they planned this all along. Look, I think that my hope is that as we get through February, it'll start to get warmer. The natural gas perfect storm will de-escalate. The price of natural gas will go down, and we can just start to back away from this. That is my hope. Hey, Laney, How are you? Lainey Peterson's awesome, by the way. You should check out her stuff. She's with Hard Lens Media. That is my hope, is that this can all just slow down. That is my real hope. But we shall see. I mean, this is dangerous. And the fact that there's not clear communication between the president of Ukraine and the president of the United States, that Zelensky and Biden don't even agree about what their phone calls are about. This is all very dangerous. This is all very, very dangerous. And the fact that Kamala Harris is just one heart attack away from the presidency, that's also very, very dangerous. It seems like there's a lot of people behind the scenes who want to keep her from getting into the White House, and that's a good thing. They're doing anything they can to keep her from being president, which is, I mean, it's amazing how many people are aware of what I'm aware of. So here we go. I mean, that's the situation that we are in. And I just wanted to give you all kind of an update before, we get to the second half of the show, which is where I answer your super chat questions. But before we do that, I have to do the roll call where I call you out as I see you, names and locations. So who's with us tonight? Names and locations. I'll call you out as I see you, names and locations. Who is with us tonight? I will call you out as I see you. This is the fun part. Now I have to I can't look at the camera while I do this. That's the way I used to do it on my phone, but now I have to look at the chat on my computer. So there we go. Nate in Chicago, Ben in Suffolk County, Enoch, Australia, Alex in Albuquerque, Montreal, Chaya, good friend of the program, St. Louis, Ash in Chicago, Micah, Kieran from San Diego, Nathaniel in Washington, JT24 in Mississippi, Jason in Georgia, Dominica, Nate Pano from Sydney, Australia. Oh, wow. They're coming right in here. I just got to roll it back up so I get everybody. Right? Who else do we got here? Ash in Chicago, Clyde Bank, Nathaniel in Washington, Kieran from San Diego, Galactic North from Indiana, Jason in Georgia, Dominica, Canada, Nate from Pano, Australia, Ontario, Canada, David in China, Springfield, Missouri, Jared in Virginia, Hampshire in the United Kingdom, Southwest Michigan, Bob Troy in New York, right? St. David's, Bermuda, Eddie from Indonesia, Wisconsin, Vancouver, Canada, Donna from Cincinnati, Temple City, California, Piano Man, New York City, Cleveland Pirate Alex, Eugene, Oregon, Fairbanks, Alaska, Io Hillary in New York, shout out to you, good friend of the show, Larry Morrow in Indiana, Lainey Peterson in Chicago, Don D in NYC, shout out to you, Don D, good friend of the show, Colin in Rhode Island, Alberta, Zach in Dallas, Georgia, Rees from Adelaide, Australia, Los Angeles, Northern Michigan, Clarence Darrow from Utah, Prince Georgia, Puerto Rico, Jason Hunt, Chicago number 9 bus. Oh, very good. I'm glad I'm entertaining you on your late night bus ride. Washington State, San Antonio, Matthew in Seattle, Christian in Bergen County, New Jersey. Shout out to you, Christian, good friend of the program. West Virginia, JR in Kalamazoo, East Harlem, New York City, Grove City, Pennsylvania, Zachary Bunch in Richmond, Virginia, Colin in Greensboro, North Carolina, Peter in New York, Pennsylvania, my comrade. All right. Grand Junction, Randy in Oregon, Jenny Lynn in Cincinnati. Shout out to you, Jenny Lynn. Ben in Denver, Balthazar in Oakland, New Zealand. Red Illuminati is out in Bayonne, New Jersey. Sao Paulo, Brazil. Joe Gale out in Nassau County. Joe Gale is a great friend of the program here. Oh, you're great, Joe Gale. We love you, Joe. We love you. Wow, who else is with us tonight? Who am I missing? Nathan in Wisconsin, Andrew Ray in Atlanta, Georgia, Ryan Preston in St. George, Utah, Split Seconds in Texas, Ace from Toronto, Pittsburgh, not Paris, David Rennie, Hamilton, Ontario, Robert from Hawaii, Bendigo, Australia, David Fox is with us. Wow, everyone's here tonight. This is great. Anthony from Detroit, Michigan, right? Mike in North Carolina, Neil Frazier in Hong Kong, Marissa in Olympia, Washington, my Texas folks, right? Springfield, Missouri, Grove Street, Chan, Jenny in Naples, Florida, Jenny Lynn, Planet Based, Planet Fitness in Newburgh. Wow, you're exercising this late at night? Are they open this late? Wow, it's cool. Troy F. in Kansas City, Missouri, Captain Waffles out in Florida, Max in the Catskills, New York. Wow. Isn't it great to have such a lovely community? We are like a really great community here, and I'm glad we've expanded. I'm glad we're on Rockfin now. I'm glad that we're on. I'm glad that we're on Facebook, streaming on Facebook, and that we're streaming on YouTube. And I'm glad that we're expanding. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we're going to start having an exclusive Rockfin show called Main Trend Analysis. That's what it's going to be called. It's going to be called Main Trend Analysis. It's going to be a show exclusively on Rockfin. That's the plan. So get ready for that. We're going to have some great stuff coming up with that. It's going to be interesting. I see up the John Brown volunteers. That's right. I love you, John Brown volunteers. You're probably sleeping out there in Texas, but you're really, really awesome. And, there you go. Very, very, very good. All right, folks. So now I'm going to start answering super chats. If you have more super chat questions for me, just please send them my way. So there you go. Will the resentment Americans have against work encourage them to build socialism? That's interesting. Now, I assume, and I haven't watched all of it, but I assume that this is a response to that Fox News segment that recently went viral about the work abolitionist. Right? There's some Reddit thread that's like anti-work. Right? They don't want people to work. They want to get to a society without work. And so Fox News is making fun of this, the whole thing about lazy young people, get a job, go out and work hard, blah, 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 blah. So there's that. But when it gets down to it, for most people, their job is not fun. Their job is a place where they feel alienated, a place where they feel degraded, a place where they feel taken advantage of, a place where they feel they are not being respected. And, this is what Karl Marx wrote about in his 1844 economic manuscripts on alienation. When a worker is at home, he is not at work. And when he is at work, he is not at home. That the worker, everything about his time on the job is alienating, right? That he doesn't, and that Marx talks about how, the craftsman, and this is a very important, when Marx talks about alienated labor in the economic manuscripts, he's talking about how the craftsman, right? If you had a pottery maker, Straits betrayed Russia inside of NATO, right? Okay. Baltic States sided with Mark, all right? Will socialism, will resentment towards work make them reluctant to build socialism? Oh, okay. Well, we'll get to that. But, I want to make this point because, Marx, he talks about how like a craftsman is the Rust Belt second subaltern. I don't know. I don't even know what that means. Like a craftsman, right? A pottery maker. There's a guy who his whole life, his job is he makes pottery. And he makes that piece of pottery by himself, right? And he spends whole days making that pottery. Even if he's just doing it to pay the bills, even if he hates being a pottery maker, he puts a part of himself into that piece of pottery. That there is somehow there's an element of the potter in the pottery, right? That if you have a basket weaver, and he weaves that whole basket by himself. He puts part of himself into that basket. And then he takes the basket that he weaves and he sells it. And that basket came from him. That's his labor he put into it. He's selling you the basket. And that the dawn of industrial capitalism, with assembly lines, with factory production, got rid of that. When a new car is made, they have these huge car manufacturing plants in Detroit. When a car is made, all the workers on the assembly line don't gather around it and say, "This is our car. We put our soul into it," because they didn't. They pushed a button here. They pushed a button here. I mean, it's, it's the work, the combined work of hundreds of people, and there's nothing of the creator in it, and he's alienated from the product. That the worker is no longer a skilled craftsman who has a spiritual connection with his work. Rather, the worker becomes an appendage to a machine. That's Marxism. That is what Marx realized, and that's the basis of alienation, right? It takes away the ability of people to really feel pride in their work, right? And it creates a situation. And thank you, Anthony Martin, for subscribing on Rockfin. It takes away their ability to really own and take pride in what they're doing, right? That is one thing that Marx wrote about. So at your job, where you function as an appendage to a machine in a typical industrial job in a factory, or increasingly in a service sector job, and that's really, McDonald's. At McDonald's, you're working on an assembly line. The assembly line doesn't make cars; it makes hamburgers. But it's not, again, a chef. Compare a chef to a McDonald's worker. A chef, he makes that food in his own special way. He puts part of his own soul into it. But at McDonald's, you're just slapping those hamburgers together. There's nothing of your soul in that Big Mac that comes out, right? And this is kind of what Marx is getting at. And so as a result, people don't feel an attachment to the product that's created. They just feel like they're renting themselves out to be an appendage of a machine. And this is alienation. And what Marx wrote at the time, he wasn't the only person talking this way when he wrote about this. For example, Durkheim was considered the father of sociology. He wrote about suicide because a lot of these factory workers, they lived in a village where they knew everybody else. They were a peasant in a village, but then they moved to the city. They got a job in a factory, and they didn't know anybody. And they had this job where they just worked on an assembly line, and they felt unvalued, and they felt disconnected from other people, and eventually they committed suicide. And there was a big rise in suicides during the Industrial Revolution because of the kind of spiritual connections and self-worth that people used to get in feudalism. Not that feudalism was better. Feudalism was a lot worse in many ways. I'm not defending feudalism. But under feudalism, people always had a place. They weren't going to be laid off. You know what I mean? They weren't just going to, be laid off, right? They always had a place, number one. And number two, under feudalism, they were attached to the products they created. When they grew those crops, they grew them with their own hand. They were part of a community. And that the factory industrial capitalism created a level of alienation where workers are disconnected from each other, where workers are disconnected from the product that they create, that left people feeling like they had no place in the world, like they were just on their own, isolated from the rest of humanity. And this is the Marxian concept of alienation. That's Marxism. And that's why people hate work under capitalism, because under capitalism, that's what work is. And that's the point, right? Now, in the Soviet Union, during the 5-year plans of Stalin, during the industrialization, and thank you, Trans Marxist, for the super chat. During the 5-year plans of Stalin, during the rapid industrialization of China, during the period in Cuba where they were industrializing, there was a very different atmosphere. Right? They talked about how in the Soviet Union, during the 5-year plans, the factories that people worked in were like community centers. They decorated them with paintings and art. They would have the kids from the community would go to the factory and do plays. Their school plays would be in the factory. And this feeling that the factory was this awful place you don't want to be in and you just want to get out of there as fast as you can, that wasn't the feeling, right? And now it may have been the feeling later in the Soviet Union, right? As things kept going in the 50s and 60s, you started to see more and more alienation. But during the 5-year economic plans, when the Soviet Union was industrializing, during the Stakhanovich movement, where workers were working extra hard to try and outdo each other, working extra long shifts, and they were building their country up from nothing, right? What they were electrifying. I mean, this whole country, before the Soviet Union, Russia was largely not electrified. There was a widespread illiteracy among the population. Uh, not access to running water and electricity. But with the Soviet Union, as Stalin was like bringing the country together to build itself up with 5-year economic plans, there was a feeling that the whole country was together and that they were working together, and that alienation kind of evaporated. And similar things happened in China, and similar things happened in Cuba, and that the process of socialist industrialization, in a way, it kind of makes that alienation evaporate. And people have seen this, right? And people commented on this. People visited the Soviet Union at the time. People visited Cuba during the industrialization. I mean, you can see that in Bolivarian communes. Now, I visited the Bolivarian communes of Venezuela. I've seen this, right? There is suddenly this new collectivism that kind of emerges among the population. Oh, thank you, Ellie Marino, for your tip. Much appreciated. Much appreciated. Um, and there is kind of this feeling that the work is for the community and that the work is not something separated from the community. Now, you don't always get that. There's a lot of, I mean, in China right now, right? China may be a socialist society, but there's probably many, many workplaces in China that are just like capitalist workplaces, where somebody comes in, they just want to get out of there, and that this isn't the difference between capitalism and socialism per se. Okay. Thoughts on the new socialist president of Honduras? Okay, I touched on that a little bit in the stream, but we'll get into that. This isn't the difference between capitalism and socialism, but when socialist countries are rapidly industrializing, and when there is 5-year economic plans, and when there's rapid economic development in socialist countries, you can begin to see the beginning of that alienation being evaporated. Just the beginning of it. You're not seeing it being completely evaporated, but you're seeing the very beginnings of the evaporation of alienation. Ultimately, an alienation won't be evaporated until the achievement of full communism, right? Until you have a world of vast material abundance. In the critique of the Goethe program, Karl Marx explains what communism is, right? Communism is a society where labor becomes life's prime want, not a means of survival. Meaning people work, and thank you, Piano Man. People work because they feel like working, right? That's what communism is. Communism is a world where there's so much abundance that has been created, so much prosperity and wealth has been created, that people work because they feel like it, because they want to be entertained. And, Marx also says communism is when the division between mental and physical labor has been abolished, when the springs of cooperative wealth flow more abundantly. Only then can the narrow horizon of bourgeois right be crossed in its entirety. So you don't really see the alienation evaporate until, it doesn't completely evaporate until you get to the final stage of communism. There's still alienation in socialism because you're still being paid a wage for your labor. In a socialist society, you're working because you're getting a wage for it. They're paying you a wage, a salary to do your job. And, and you still, don't want to be there. You're still renting yourself out, except you're renting yourself out to society, to the state, to the collective, to the cooperative. You're not renting yourself out to a capitalist boss who's trying to make profits from you. You're renting yourself out to the state, right? But you're still renting yourself out. And in the market sector, you're going to be renting yourself out to a capitalist, right? Or you might be renting yourself out to a cooperative that sells its goods to the state. In a socialist planned economy, you're still going to have alienation. The only way that alienation is ultimately overcome is by eradicating scarcity. But this anti-work interview, I only watched a little bit of it. I think it was Jesse Waters from Fox News, and he's interviewing this guy who runs a Reddit thread about abolishing work. And it's this guy with glasses who's looking It was awful. I mean, and I saw that, and it's just this is the Fox News. They're caricaturizing a leftist, right? We're all lazy kids who need to go get a job and have never worked a good day in our life and lack self-discipline and want to get free stuff from the government. Fox News is for old folks. It's for the senior citizens who are mad at young people, and they don't understand that the economy is much worse than it used to be. And they don't understand the cost of living, rent, and housing is much more than it used to be. And they don't understand the crisis of student debt. And in their minds, all these young people that aren't buying houses and aren't getting married and aren't buying cars, well, they just haven't worked hard enough. Um, but at the end of the day, a lot of them are working very, very hard, but it's not getting them anywhere. Um, and on top of that, the issues is not simply a lack of work. Now, what the guy in the interview was saying was that they eventually want to get to a world where there isn't any work, right? I think he was kind of getting at what I'm getting at on here. We want to get to a world of vast abundance and prosperity where people only work because they feel like working, right? To each according to their own ability, to each according to their needs. But Fox News was trying to spin it in this negative way. But ultimately, I believe America is a country where people really believe in hard work. That whole American dream, anyone can make it if you just go, go, go. I think that this is a country where, yes, a lot of people hate their jobs. Yes, a lot of people, don't like the experience they have on the job. But this idea of we're going to go work hard and achieve our dreams is very well inculcated among the population. So Chaya, I don't think you're necessarily correct in that, and that in a socialist society, I wrote a book called "Getting Rich Without Capitalism." And I actually am going to have this chat with Jackson Hinkle. I'm going to talk to Jackson Hinkle about this on Sunday because there's so much confusion about this. But in a socialist society, it would be much easier to work hard and get ahead than capitalism. I had this English professor in college who was, I had this English professor in college who didn't understand Marxism. And I remember I just wanted to slap myself or slap her or something. I was just so angry. I was sitting there in class and we were talking about Marxism. And she was talking about how when she first was a professor, and this is true, when she first was a professor, she didn't have enough money to feed her kids. Which, I mean, I feel, deep sympathy for that. When she first was a professor, she didn't have enough money to feed her kids. She was a single mom and she wasn't making very much as an adjunct professor. And she, like the school was like, one talking about taking her kids away because she wasn't, the lunches that she packed them for school were so small and didn't have enough food in them. And just how hard it was to become a full-time college professor. Right. And so she said, and that's why I hate communism, she said, because communism would make it so I couldn't work hard and get beyond that. It's like, no, 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 no. Communism would mean that you would never have to be in that situation to begin with, right? But that, in her mind, that was, communism is where everyone has to stay in poverty and no one's allowed to work hard and get ahead. Well, no. In a rationally planned socialist economy, many people will be able to get ahead. Why do you think there's so many billionaires in China? If it wasn't for the rationally planned state-run economy where growth is allowed to continue without the irrationality of the market, they would never have that many billionaires. Bring the jobs back. All right, we'll talk about that. Bring the jobs back. That's the first thing. Um, and on top of that, I mean, the goal is to create vast abundance. And a lot of people think communists are against wealth. That communists are against wealth. They're against people having stuff. People have stuff. That's capitalism. People go shopping. That's capitalism. And communists want everyone to be poor, so it's fair. Or we want everyone to be poor because money is bad. That is wrong. The goal is to create so much wealth and prosperity and abundance in society that the very need for the state can fade away, from each according to their own ability to each according to their needs. The basis for social hierarchies, the basis for inequality, the basis for the state is scarcity. And the road to abolishing these things is abundance. So there you go. All right. What did I think of the Hinkle Cedar debate? I mean, Sam Cedar, he conceded all the points. I don't care. Right. I mean, I watched it and it was like Jackson did his homework. Right. And that was the thing, is I think Sam Cedar was looking to have a philosophical conversation. And instead, Jackson Hinkle brought facts. He brought facts to the table. He brought facts and he said, no, no. And on this vote, they did this. And on that vote, he came armed with facts, which is what I did to Destiny. It was very similar to my debate with Destiny. Destiny came in with it pumped up that, there couldn't be, and I brought facts. I brought all these facts about socialist countries and what they've achieved and actual data and statistics, and it blew Destiny away. Well, that's what Jackson Hinkle did with Sam Cedar. He brought facts and numbers about how the squad has not done anything for progressives. It was great. Good for him. Good for him. And Sam Cedar was just kind of reduced to, I don't care. Well, they're better than the other ones. And that's not an argument, and it was very effective. I'm glad Jackson Hinkle did it. I love Jackson Hinkle. I really love him. I'm going on with him on Sunday. It's going to be a great stream. He's really awesome. All right, aggression by the USA around the world during the pandemic. Did it serve a purpose? Yeah, of course. Kick them when they're down, right? I mean, that's when your enemy is in a weak position, you attack like any good predator, right? Right? They talk about how, like, what is it? The lion. The lion will hang out by the river, so that when the other beasts that they prey on are drinking from the river, they got their head down, they're drinking, they can pounce on them, right? You want to pounce on your enemy when they're down. That's exactly what was done to Iran. Iran was hit very badly with COVID-19 and the pandemic. It really caused a lot of problems in Iran. And so then the USA, turned the screws on and put new sanctions on Iran and tried everything they could to exacerbate the crisis in Iran. Right? They put new sanctions on Venezuela, made it harder for Venezuela to import medicine. Yeah, U.S. aggression during the pandemic definitely served a purpose. Definitely served a purpose. Absolutely served a purpose. Right? I mean, this is what vicious predatory beasts do. So yeah, I mean, the USA, yeah, it saw that some countries around the world were struggling because of the pandemic, and it went for the kill. Yeah, it's the activity of thieves and scoundrels and murderers. Yeah. Um, is Russia and China going to breach the Anglosphere with English-speaking news? Well, there's RT, there's CGTN, there's CCTV. There is English-speaking news in the Anglosphere, if you can choose to watch it. You know, um, but what do you mean breach the Anglosphere? I don't know what that means, but yes, there is more perspectives available, right? You can get alternative viewpoints nowadays. That used to be mainstream media had much more of a monopoly, and they don't. They don't have the monopoly they once had. You can get alternative views and perspectives on things. Reach the Anglosphere. I don't know what that means, but yes, are there more views now because of international TV networks? Yeah. All right. Um, the special relationship between the USA and the UK. It's interesting. A lot of you know, when you talk about the special relationship, okay, right? We all know that the 13 colonies were colonies of Britain, right? The United States had the 13 colonies that were colonies of Britain. We had the Revolution of 1776, but there's a very strong economic relationship. We talk about the Anglo-American establishment. That's Carroll Quigley. A lot of the New England old money families are very tied in with British families, and there's Cecil Rhodes and the Round Table Group and the Council on Foreign Relations, and but there is a big bond between the British and the American ruling class, and that culturally, not as much anymore, not as much anymore, but historically in the United States, historically, especially during the Victorian times, there was very much a cultural overlap. I'm getting tired, but it's okay. I'll keep going. I've heard people say that in a lot of ways, America is more English than England. Well, not anymore. England has changed and the United States has changed. But you look at like Norman Rockwell paintings. Look at an old Norman Rockwell painting. You ever seen the paintings of Norman Rockwell? Um, that's that old America, that like pre World War II classical America is culturally very Anglo, very, very Anglo. And it's not Anglo. England's been around for thousands of years, but it's Victorian England, right? The values of Victorian England were very prevalent in the United States, and as Britain was starting to move away from them in the 20th century, we doubled down and we kept them up. And really, the 60s Cultural Revolution and now, more immigration and stuff. The USA isn't as culturally British as it was once. But I grew up in middle America, right? I grew up in a small town, and my parents are both Irish Americans, but they are Protestant Irish American, and they've been here for many generations. And yeah, there's a very, very English, I'm kind of surprised. I look at my own life and I think I'm very, very Anglo in a lot of ways. For example, in the United States, we are really into cleanliness, right? We are all about deodorant and no body odor and taking a shower, and brushing your teeth. And we are all about this obsession with cleanliness. They say cleanliness is next to godliness, right? And that there's a lot of people around the world who say it's not healthy. That that Americans we might wash our hair too much actually. That we don't smell like a person, right? I mean, it's one thing to not have body odor and stuff, but we don't smell like a person. We just, yeah, I mean, that we are really into cleanliness here. I'm like that. That's how I grew up, right? I mean, if I ever think I have body odor, I'm taking a shower, I'm putting on some deodorant, I'm brushing my teeth, right? You don't want to smell. You don't want to, you want to be extra clean. Well, that's very Victorian England. Um, threatening to keep Russia out of SWIFT would only strengthen their ties with China. All right, all right, we'll put that down. All right, keeping Russia out of SWIFT, strengthening ties to China. That's very, very English, right? Another thing, right? During the Victorian times in Britain, there was a huge public relations effort to encourage people not to masturbate, right? There was this whole effort that like masturbation was this dirty habit that would make you crazy. And during Victorian times, there was this huge effort to make people not masturbate. And it's interesting because Antonio Gramsci wrote about how that was about making sure people had enough nervous energy that they could work in a factory, right? If people don't have sexual release, they tend to be, have more jumpy nervous energy that's effective. That was the rise of it makes you a better worker on the assembly line, basically, is what that's about. Is what Gramsci says in his prison notebooks, which I think is hilarious. But that was in the United States too. There was a big effort. In fact, that's why graham crackers were invented. Little known fact. The man who invented the graham cracker believed that masturbation was caused by the belief that that you should have sex for pleasure rather than procreating. So he thought that was rooted in the idea that you should eat for pleasure rather than for nourishment. Books on the Belt and Road. All right. So he invented the graham cracker as just a completely bland food item, this bland food item that people would eat, and then that would encourage them to not eat for pleasure. So then maybe they wouldn't have sex for pleasure, and then they would not masturbate, right? And he also encouraged circumcision, right? He believed that if you're circumcised, men are circumcised, they'll masturbate less, right? Well, this obsession with not masturbating, that's very Victorian England, right? And that's Norman Rockwell America. We're all squeaky clean and we don't, and no one ever masturbates, and that's very American. What else is very Anglo? Spanking, right? Spanking children, spanking them on their bottoms. That's very Anglo, right? That is very much. They talk about England, six of the best. You're going to get six strokes with a cane, right? Michael Moore has when he had TV Nation, he had a whole comedy segment about corporal punishment and how English it was. And it's this, the British were really into corporal punishment, not emotional corporal punishment, not like, the parent gets mad and whacks the kid in the face, not the parent picking up their belt and chasing the kid around the house. You will never talk to me like that. Yeah. No. This ceremony, right? This, you have done this, young man, so I am going to strike you 17 times upon your buttocks to teach you to behave. And it's like this formalized ceremonial corporal punishment. That's extremely English. That is extremely English. And that's also in the United States, right? I mean, in the United States, we still have paddling. 19 US states still have corporal punishment in public schools. In public schools, teachers can spank students with paddles. In every other Western country, that's been completely outlawed in public schools, but not in the United States. In the United States, it's very ingrained in our culture, right? Now, again, you wouldn't know that if you live in New York City. You wouldn't know that if you live in New England or if you live in Los Angeles. But if you live in Alabama or you live in Texas, you're going to see that. And this workaholic, right? The idea that, you work hard to get ahead, that's also very Anglo. A lot of the old American values, right? That we think of, a lot of the cultural stuff, social conservatism. I guess the things we think of as being socially conservative in the United States are very Anglo, very, very Anglo. The death penalty. I think the way we practice the death penalty in the United States is extremely Anglo because it's devoid of emotion. right? We execute the person for what they did like 20 years after they do it, right? Because we don't want it to be like swift revenge, right? And so it's like, well, we're not getting revenge, and it's 20 years, and it's this elaborate ceremony, and we do it in a way that's like, it's like, again, a lot of this is very, very, very a lot of this is very, very culturally Anglo. But the thing is, they're not like this in Britain anymore. In Britain, they're not like this. In Britain, they don't have the death penalty anymore. In Britain, they don't cane kids in public school anymore. So Britain isn't like this anymore. This is just, I guess, culturally speaking, late 1800s to 1970s America was very, very much influenced by Victorian England, and the way people conducted themselves. When you look at those old Norman Rockwell paintings, that is very, very much American, I guess. And that Adam Smith free market, free trade economics kind of corresponds the mindset of that, right? It's like, some people work hard and they should be rewarded, and poor people are just inferior or lazy. That's very much the mindset of Adam Smith, free trade, free market economics. And that, in Britain, it was worse. I mean, Charles Darwin came along and they started arguing that Darwinian evolution proved that some races were just naturally superior to others, right? And that, oh, well, these poor people in Africa are just inferior to us, and these people in Asia are just inferior to us. The reason that the West is on top is because we are the superior race genetically. Charles Darwin, it proved it, right? I mean, that kind of scientific racism, or pseudo-scientific racism, I should say, and that belief that the rich are rich because they're just better, and the poor are poor because they're just inferior. Survival of the fittest. That is very English. Also, that's very Victorian, right? So a lot of the not so good things about America are very, very Victorian and English. That is true. Darwinism is cringe. Well, there you go. I mean, I accept Darwinian biology. I mean, I don't think that what he wrote was wrong necessarily in terms of biology, but you can't apply it to then therefore argue for free market capitalism. That doesn't work. But yeah, a lot of the uglier things about American history are rooted in kind of a cultural bond with Victorian England. Britain was the first major imperialist power, you have to remember. And I've talked about this in my book. In my book, City Builders and Vandals, I talk about the Atlanticist pathology. And Atlanticism has a cultural effect on a country. Before we move on from this topic, I just can't help but mention, but the first serial killer in human history was Jack the Ripper. In 1888, they started finding prostitutes, sex workers, prostitutes cut in pieces. And they were like, what's going on? Well, some guy was hiring prostitutes and cutting them into pieces, and he was getting off on it. That had never happened before. That kind of deranged, psychotic behavior, murderous, behavior had never happened before. Well, it was tied into Britain, and it was tied into the British Empire, and it was tied into the sexual repression of the British Empire. It was tied into the culture of punishment and sadism. It was tied into the culture of militarism that was developing, the teaching people to be indifferent to other people's suffering. It was a form of psychotic derangement humanity had never seen, and Jack the Ripper was the first one, and the whole world was kind of horrified by Jack the Ripper. And the London Times, the newspaper, started receiving thousands of letters from British people claiming that they were Jack the Ripper. Thousands of people wrote to the London Times anonymous letters claiming that they were Jack the Ripper. That's not normal behavior either, right? There's some horrendous serial killer who's chopping women up into pieces and eating them and doing all these awful, gross things. Who in their right mind says, you know what, I'm going to write a letter to the newspaper saying that I'm the guy who did it? That's not normal behavior. But why was it happening? It was happening because culturally in Britain, okay, maybe there was only one Jack the Ripper, but there were thousands and thousands of people that, as a result of that Atlanticist culture, that taught them to repress their own sexual feelings, that taught them to, that war and militarism was the most important and most amazing thing. that taught them to, be indifferent to the suffering of others, that kind of glorified punishment, and where they were surrounded by, kind of punishment, where there was widespread use of the death penalty, but also widespread use of this kind of ceremonial, ritualized corporal punishment of children, that all of this led to a kind of mental derangement that emerged in Britain, where you saw serial killers. And from 1888, when we saw Jack the Ripper, up until the 1980s, serial killers were a fact of Western capitalist society. They had them in Germany, they had them in Britain, they had them in the United States. Ted Bundy, all the serial killers were everywhere. They were just everywhere. And then in about the early 2000s, they stopped. We don't have them anymore. I mean, they rarely happen nowadays, right? That kind of, Jack the Ripper stuff, it used to be very common. It used to happen, I mean, there'd be some really horrendous ones would kill a lot of people. It was used to be that all the time, there'd be some guy who kills a woman and cuts her into pieces and gets off on it. That used to be really widespread. Not anymore. It doesn't happen. Doesn't happen. It rarely happens, right? Thoughts on serial killers in popular media and the general obsession with serial killers. Well, I mean, people, again, it's scary, it's sexual, it's yeah, I mean, true crime is a big thing, but but it stopped. I mean, it rarely happens. And this is one thing, they talk about how newspapers never report on any good news. Well, this is some good news, right? We don't have serial killers like we once did, right? It used to be that was happening. What we have now are mass shooters. We didn't used to have that, right? I mean, when the Columbine massacre happened when I was in high school, it was people had never seen anything like it. The Columbine shooting, horrified the world. Well, you know, things have changed. Now, what has changed? Why do we don't have serial killers now? There's different theories. Some people say that it's simply a matter of medications. That some teenage boy starts acting like he might be a serial killer, and his family hears about it, and they put him on medication, and he goes and sees a psychiatrist, and he gets on medication. He doesn't do that. Maybe that's what it is. Then some people say that this is an interesting one, that it's pornography, right? That nowadays, you have to admit this, starting around the time serial killers ended, pornography was very accessible all of a sudden. There was porn everywhere, right? The internet in the 70s, they used to blame these serial killers on porn. The idea was, well, men see porn and it makes them deranged killers. Well, porn's everywhere now, and the serial killer thing has decreased. So that argument doesn't really hold up. I've heard some people even argue that it's Viagra, right? That these men are doing it because they have erectile dysfunction. I've heard this, right? People make this argument that these men, they have erectile dysfunction, and they are frustrated and feel shame about their erectile dysfunction, and so they go and murder the women to like prove their dominance, to like compensate for their erectile dysfunction. Well, now they just take Viagra, they don't have erectile dysfunction, so they don't hate women as much, and they get over it. I've heard different arguments about it, but regardless, we have mass shooters now, which we didn't used to have. That's a new thing. The high school kid who goes and kills all his classmates, the college student who goes and shoots up his college, the high school age kid who goes to an elementary school and kills a bunch of elements. That didn't used to happen. That didn't used to happen. Now it happens all the time. So we've given birth to a new form of criminal psychopathy because our society has somewhat changed. But the era of Jack the Ripper, the era of Ted Bundy is over. That's a good thing. But, now we have to deal with the school shooters. So it's a problem. I am not a criminologist. I'm just kind of reflecting here. But Atlanticism, the Atlanticist mindset, the mindset of Victorian England and serial killers are deeply tied up with each other. There's no question about it, right? That it was imperialism, it was the imperialist society and its ascendancy. That's what gave birth to serial killers. No doubt about it. No question about it. And now that we're kind of moving toward a new stage, I argue that we had primitive accumulation was the first stage of capitalism. That's when the capitalists were seizing the means of production. We're basically seizing capitalism from feudalism. Then we had industrialization, the rise of industrial capitalism, and then we had imperialism. And I argue we're now in a new stage of capitalism I call accumulation through destruction. That we're not living under regular imperialism, that, that there are, and that's a whole thing. If you watch my class, What is Scientific Socialism? I get into this a little bit. I argue that we're no longer living in classical imperialism, right? That the nation state, for example, isn't the way it is. There's no labor aristocracy now. They're demolishing the labor aristocracy. They're not seizing the raw materials of countries that they take over. They're doing the opposite. They're preventing raw materials from being acquired. From the perspective of imperialism, how does buying Norwegian and British gas differ from buying Russian gas? Why aren't we hearing that Norwegian gas is being held hostage? All right, very good. I can talk about that. Very easy answer to that. Why is buying Russian gas? Very good. Good question. Anyway, that was a long answer about the USA and the UK. Why is Richard Spencer attacking me? I think he's struggling to remain relevant. I mean, isn't he broke? Didn't they sue him? Right? Didn't didn't he get sued at the Charlottesville trial and like lose all his money? And I think he's struggling to remain relevant, is what it is. And I think I'll give him some play. And I retweeted you know, you know, a lot of these guys are struggling to remain relevant. Matt Heimbeck and Richard Spencer, and these people. When Trump was in office, the media needed to demonize Donald Trump, so it gave these guys endless amounts of play. I mean, if I was Hillary Clinton, I would have paid these people. I mean, they were the best friends the Democrats ever had. They were the you know Oh, that's interesting. But they were the best friends the Democrats ever had. The Democrats, I mean, did everything they could to be like, these people are Trump's people. Trump is just like these people. They're white supremacist, Hitler worshippers, neo Nazis, and they're irrelevant. I mean, they're really irrelevant at this point. Charlottesville was like the culmination. It was just a bunch of people on the internet mostly, and they were on the internet, and then every so often one of them would go on a killing spree and shoot up their school. And they decided to do the Charlottesville thing. And so they did the Charlottesville thing. And then ever since then, they've just kind of faded into obscurity. And so, yeah, Richard Spencer's tweeted at me a few times and whatever. I tweeted back at him and, whatever. I mean, he's saying that if I was really a socialist, I should want World War III to happen because that would open the door to some kind of socialist revolution. Well, I'll tell you, the last person that I want advice from about how to be a socialist is Richard Spencer. I cannot think of anyone who is less entitled to tell me how I should be a socialist than Richard Spencer. I mean, give me a break. Give me a break. I'm sorry. Richard Spencer says I should think this. Oh boy, better change my mind. I mean, give me a break. Give me a break. Are you serious? You really, I mean, yeah, he's tweeting at me. Look, Trump's not in office anymore, right? The media doesn't have any need to wave them in front of our faces to scare us all into opposing Trump. Trump's been defeated. January 6th happened, and most of those people January 6th were not white supremacists, mind you. They were just QAnon people or Trump supporters and all of that. The actual like white nationalist, white supremacist, Holocaust denial, that group of people is a very, very small, specific group of people. Um, a lot of the people on the internet who talk that way don't even believe it. They're teenage, what they call edge lords, who are just trying to get a rise out of people. They're trolling, right? There's a lot of teenagers who like to post racist memes on the internet, who like to go around saying pro Hitler things, but they're not. They're just being sarcastic, rude. It's like they like to get a rise out of people. It's like they enjoy kind of bullying. It's this kind of, it's, I don't know if bullying is the right word, but it's this thing that teenagers do. They talk about edgelordism, where teenagers love to like shock you, right? I've met many people like this in my life, unfortunately, and they just love to like shock you. There's a guy at my college once, and and he said, in Ohio, the law is that a knife can only be this long, and I said, okay, and why do I care? Because then he pulls out of his pocket a knife that's like 2 inches longer than that, just to show he's breaking the law to me. Oh boy, am I impressed. A lot of the people on the internet that are talking neo-Nazi stuff. Oh, thank you, Red Precarian, for your tip. I really do appreciate it. A lot of the people on the internet that are talking neo-Nazi stuff, it's that, right? They want to shock you. They want to scare you. They want to, oh, look, my knife is 2 inches longer than the Ohio law. Oh yeah, I did say that. I did use the N-word. Oh yeah, I did say that Hitler was good. I mean, that's a lot of the people on the internet. The overwhelming majority of people you see on the internet who are neo-Nazis are not actually neo-Nazis. They're stupid teenagers. And that's why if they were actually neo-Nazis, they'd be on a neo-Nazi web forum. But they're not. They go to, socialist spaces, they go to leftist spaces, and it's like a cyberbullying edgelord childishness. There is a small group of people who are, yes, indeed, Holocaust deniers, white supremacists, Ku Klux Klan kind of people. They're a very small minority, very, very small group. And I would say they probably are growing now because of the economic crisis and because of the Western society being in all this confusion. So it's not like they're completely irrelevant, but the idea that Trump was one of them and Trump is on the brink of taking power, like, I'm sorry, like can we get back to planet Earth, please? Like, no, Trump was not one of them, and Trump was not on the brink of bringing them to power. And it's like that Spike Lee movie, Black Klansman. It was a good movie, but it played into this idea that there's a secret Nazi conspiracy that has infiltrated the government, and the job of leftists is to play this like conspiracy theory game to find the secret Nazi conspiracy. And that's what ContraPoints believes. How to Spot a Fascist, her first big video, is all about, oh my God, there's this secret Nazi conspiracy, and if they do this with their hands or that with their hands, or they use this spray, and it's like they're trying to play the secret hand signs code game to find out, who are the secret Nazis in the government or something. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. It's really the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Where they're trying to, it's like the Da Vinci Code. They're looking for the secret signs or something to figure out the secret Nazis in the government. It's the dumbest thing in the world. It really is. It really is, and it's embarrassing. And these people are dumb. And I mean, you can say, based on the silly games they play, you can say anyone's a Nazi. Look, I wrote a book, and I used a phrase. I said the people of the world and the United States must realize their common enemy and fight for a better life for themselves and their children. Basically, I'm calling for the people of the world to unite, people of the United States to unite and struggle against imperialism. And they said, oh, that's the 14 words. How is that the 14 words? One of the most important words of the George Lincoln Rockwell white supremacist 14 words is white. You know what I mean? And I at no point said white. I actually said the opposite. I said the people of the United States coming together with the people of the world. I mean, it's like if you read the passage I wrote, it has absolutely nothing in common. The only word that I used that is similar to the 14 words is the word children. Okay. But somehow everything's a dog whistle. Everything's a secret Nazi code. It's not about what people actually advocate. It's not about what people actually believe. It's about playing this silly game where we try to find the secret code hand signs that they use. It's this dumb thing. I just want to slap these people. Seriously. I mean, it's really, really dumb. Anyway, what were we talking about again? Richard Spencer. That's how we got on that. All right. Well, we beat that horse into the ground. What are the differences between Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, and Third Worldism? I mean, talk about leftist inside baseball, man. I had a grandfather who was a baseball fan. And if you put him and another baseball fan into the same room, they would start using words that no one else knew. They'd start using phrases that started referencing. And pretty soon, if you weren't part of their little subculture, you'd have no idea what they're talking about. Communism can be like that. Right? There's a lot of inside baseball in communism. You just asked me a very inside baseball question. But because you asked it and you did pay me a super chat, I will answer the question. Okay? The answer is this. All right. So China, led by Mao, has a socialist revolution. Mao is the leader of China. Soviet Union and China obviously have their falling out. So around the world, new communist parties are formed in the early 1960s that are, quote unquote, anti-revisionist parties. They're parties, the Soviet Union, according to China, has sold out. They're revisionists. And so China, around the world, new communist parties are formed that are aligned with China. In the USA, there's the Progressive Labor Party. There's the Hammer and Steel organization. And there's eventually the Revolutionary Communist Party and the October League. In Canada, there's the Communist Party of Canada, Marxist-Leninist, the CPCML. In Germany, there's the MLPD, the Marxist-Leninist Party of Germany. In Britain, there's a million of them in Britain, but all over the world, they try to find new communist parties that are aligned with China. Right? People generally call these people Maoists. But they don't call themselves Maoists, right? They're anti-revisionists, they're Marxist-Leninists, whatever. They think the Soviet Union's revisionist. They're looking for inspiration from China. Fast forward to about 1971, China announces that the Soviet Union is the main danger to the people of the world. The Soviet Union is social imperialist, right? And that the USA, it's okay for Nixon and Mao to be buddy-buddy because the Soviet Union is so dangerous, right? The Soviets are the people of the world. China embraces Pinochet in Chile in 1973. China is supporting the Shah of Iran. China is supporting Haile Selassie in Ethiopia. China is aligning with all the US-backed military dictators and stuff around the world because the Soviet Union is the main danger. A lot of these people that are hardline communists that are formed, the Communist Party, Marxist-Leninist, or the Progressive Labor, a lot of them don't buy that. A lot of these communists that were aligned with China and trying to build more revolutionary parties, like, wait a second, we supported China because they were more anti-imperialist. Now China's aligning with the imperialists, so we don't buy that. But some of them did. The ones that were really loyal to China, like the October League in the United States, they went along with it, right? The Revolutionary Communist Party, they went along with it. Then fast forward to 1976. 1976, Mao Zedong dies. Deng Xiaoping comes to power. Well, Deng Xiaoping ends the Cultural Revolution. He launches the reform and opening up in China. So all these parties that are aligned with China have to deal with. Do they support that or do they oppose that? Well, some of them support it. The people that are now the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, they were once called the Revolutionary Workers Headquarters, a group of people in the Revolutionary Communist Party who supported China doing that. Okay, right? The Communist Party of India, Marxist, the CPIM, right? It's a communist party in India, and they supported China and Deng Xiaoping, so they were like Maoists, or they were aligned with China, but they supported it. But and again, this is like a split from a split from a split from a split from a split. You get people that were aligned with China, that supported China when China was saying that the United States was the main enemy, that supported Mao until Mao's death. And then after Mao died, they declared that China was not socialist any longer and that no country in the world was socialist because China had been the only country that was socialist and no country in the world was socialist. And Albania had been aligned with China. They didn't like Albania either. And those folks who think that China sold out in 1976, and at the time that China sold out in 1976, all the other countries were not really socialist, right? That China was the one true socialist country in the world. And then China betrayed the revolution in 1976. Those people, they had a meeting in like 1980. There was a conference somewhere. And they declared at this conference that their ideology was Marxism, Leninism, Maoism. China has never referred to Maoism. In the Chinese Communist Party, they talk about Mao Zedong thought. They never said Maoism. They say that in China, they have Marxist-Leninist ideology. They have Mao Zedong thought. They have Deng Xiaoping theory. But they don't have Maoism. They don't have the ideology of Marxism, Leninism, Maoism. No, they have the Marxist-Leninist ideology, and they have Mao Zedong thought, and then they have Deng Xiaoping's theory. But they don't have Maoism, right? And that around the world, there are many communist parties in the world that say they believe in Marxism, Leninism, and they have Mao Zedong thought, but they don't have Maoism. Maoism. There's a very, very small group of communist parties in the world who believe in Maoism. The Shining Path of Peru, which was a crazy ultra-leftist terrorist extremist group that did very big damage to the political left in Peru and alienated a lot of people. Awful, awful organization, the Shining Path in Peru, that went around assassinating other communist parties. They were Marxist, Leninist, Maoists, right? The Naxals of India, they're isolated and in the rural countryside and have kind of abandoned the industrial working class of India and are trying to wage a peasant war like it's 1930. The Naxals of India believe in Marxism, Leninism, Maoism. In Nepal, interestingly, The communists of Nepal used to believe in Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, but then the king was toppled and they entered an alliance. And now the communists of Nepal have merged into one communist party. And some of them were from this Marxist, Leninist, Maoist current. Some of them believed in Mao Zedong thought. Some of them were like Soviet aligned communists or unified Marxist, Leninists. So in Nepal, they used to believe that, and then they actually moved into taking power. But it is a very, very small current. In the United States, the main party that is associated with this type of thinking is the Revolutionary Communist Party, followers of Baba Avakian. But now they don't even believe in it anymore. Now they argue that Baba Avakian's teachings are beyond Marx and Lenin and Mao. They follow their great leader Baba Avakian. And there's some like silly, Red Guard clubs or something like that. They believe in Marxism, Leninism, Maoism. All right. So, and now we're getting into really inside baseball here. And again, because I'm enough of a nerd that I care about this stuff, I will go here. But I don't know if I should. This is probably hurting my viewership to go here, but whatever. Among Marxist, Leninist, Maoists, so among this very, very small minority of communists, like we're like communists, small group, communists aligned with China, even smaller group, communists who used to be aligned with China and then cut off ties with China in 1976, very small group. Among people who used to be aligned with China, we're talking about really small group. Among people who used to be aligned with China, there is a certain group of people who think that there is no hope for having a socialist revolution in the first world because of the aristocracy of labor. They argue that because workers in the first world benefit from imperialism, which they do, right? There's a higher standard of living in the United States than in India. There's a higher standard of living in Britain than in South Africa, right? That because workers in the first world benefit from imperialism, they have no revolutionary potential. That workers in the first world are not proletarians. They're the exploiters. That's what third worldists believe. So it is a very obscure type of communist, right? And the MLM, Marxist, Leninist, Maoists, that's one group. And among them, there is an obscure category of people who think that there is no hope for socialism in first world countries because all of the workers in the first world are bought off exploiters. And there's two books that are put out from this perspective. One is called Divided World, Divided Class by Zachary Cope. And the other is actually quite popular now on the internet for some reason. It's called Settlers, the Mythology of the White Proletariat. And both of these books put out some kind of version of that theory, that the working class of the first world are inherently backward and reactionary and have no revolutionary potential. That's third worldism. So you wanted to know what the difference between regular Marxist, Leninist, Maoists and third worldists. I just explained it. And again, we're in some really inside baseball, right? And I always hesitate to go on these very, very deep rabbit holes like this because, I mean, this is emphasizing how cut off we are from average people. Can you imagine what I just explained to you, right? I just explained this, could you imagine, you have a coworker who's never met a communist before, has no idea what socialism or communism is, and you go and have that conversation with them. Can you imagine how difficult that would be? There's so many, and so you must believe this, and then that leads you to believe this, and that leads you to believe this, and that leads you to believe this. I mean, it's like, and you start trying to explain third worldism to a coworker who's never heard a socialist argument before, or thinks socialism is when the government gives people free stuff. We can do better than that as a movement. But I indulged it because we are on the internet after all, and many of us watching are socialists and communists, so we can talk about it. All right, cool. All right. Did China support Saudi Arabia against Yemen? No, China has business relations with Saudi Arabia. Okay? China has business relations with Saudi Arabia, recognizes Saudi Arabia, has an embassy in Saudi Arabia, so they couldn't recognize the Houthis. No one in the world recognizes the Houthis. They don't have a recognized government internationally at this point. Even Iran has diplomatic relations with Saudi Arabia. So yeah, China has not conferred recognition upon the Houthi government, but that's irrelevant. So there you go. And China does business, and China is not spreading revolution around the world. They're not trying to spread communism all over the world and export it. That's not what they're trying to do. Are people waking up to mainstream media manipulation because of West Elm Caleb's disappearance? I should hope so. I should really hope so. I really should hope so. It really annoys me the way mainstream media is able to manipulate people and change the conversation. So I really hope that's the case. You signed up for the CPI. When do you hear back? Well, you should be receiving an email either on Friday night or on Saturday morning inviting you to our next membership Zoom call, which happens every Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 12 noon Pacific. And if you sign up on the website, everyone who signs up on the website gets an email invite. Now, I will warn you, it sometimes goes to your spam, but you will get that email invite if you sign up on the website. That's how it works. And a lot of people say, oh, I signed up and I never heard back. Well, you did hear back because you were getting that email. There are hundreds of people who get that email every week. A lot of people, it goes into their spam. So if for some reason you don't get that email Friday or Saturday morning, you can message me and I can send it to you. You can message somebody else in CPI, they can send it to you. But yes, every Saturday we have our Zoom call, our weekly Zoom call for the Center for Political Innovation at 3 p.m. All right. Can you start a CPI club at your university? That's not generally how CPI works. You should start a Students and Youth for a New America club at your university. On high school and college campuses, the affiliate of the Center for Political Innovation is a club called Students and Youth for a New America, SYNA. So yeah, but that's, if you want to start a CPI club, you want to start a Students and Youth for a New America club. If I could add any amendment to the U.S. Constitution, what would it be? It would be that the state has an obligation to control the economy to benefit the population. It would be that the rights of the people to a decent life and the protection of the general welfare trumps the right of capitalists to make profits and the property rights of business owners. All right. Why have so many Baltic states sided with NATO? Because when the Soviet Union fell, a lot of these countries, became very, very poor and dominated by Western capitalism and have U.S. aligned governments. That's why. Thoughts on the new socialist president of Honduras? I think Jesus Christ said, "Ye shall know them by their fruits." You shall know them by their fruits. Sometimes there are politicians who take office saying very, very moderate things, but end up doing very radical things. Sometimes there are presidents who take office saying very, very radical things, but end up not doing very much. You shall know them by their fruits. If anyone has any more super chats, now would be the time to shoot them my way. I'll judge them by what they do. Bring the jobs back to America. Well, look, outsourcing and playing workers in one country against workers in another country, the global race to the bottom, that's a reality. However, the main jobs killer is not outsourcing. The main jobs killer is technology, right? Artificial intelligence, computers. The main killer of jobs is technology, and that's because of the capitalist, problem of the tendency of the falling rate of profit, the problem of overproduction. Technology exacerbates the problem of capitalism that is built in, that the worker can never buy back what he produces. It would be great to have, trade deals that protected the rights of U.S. workers. It would be great to have these, the manufacturing under public ownership. So it wasn't simply a profit-based decision. It was made by the community. But at the end of the day, the main killer of jobs is technology. And that can be only resolved by having a socialist society where the banks, factories, and industries are organized to serve the people, not the profits of a few. Kicking Russia out of SWIFT, that'll strengthen their ties to China. Yeah, but it'll also prevent them from selling natural gas, because how are they going to pay for natural gas if there's no access to the global banking system? And that's what this is about. It's about dominating the global oil and gas markets. So there you go. Books on the Belt and Road. Read When China Rules the World by Martin Jakes. That's a very, or what is it? No. Yeah, is Martin Jakes, is that the author's name? Yeah. When China Rules the World. Very good. That's a great book. If you want to read about it. Apologies if I already asked, but thoughts on the burgeoning Europe split over USA and Russia. Okay, that's cool. That's kind of related to what the next one. All right. Split in Europe over USA and Russia. Yeah, I touched it on in the opening, but I'll touch on it a little bit more. But why is buying Norwegian gas different from buying Russian gas? Because there's not as much of it. Norway doesn't produce anywhere near as much natural gas as Russia does. Nowhere near it. Yeah, they have some. And on top of that, Norway is absorbed into the Western capitalist, economic structure. Norway is not an independent country. It's part of the global imperialist setup. It's an imperialist country. It's part of the imperialist club. It's never going to be as influential as the United States or France or Britain, but it's part of the imperialist club, number one. Number two, it doesn't have anywhere near as much natural gas as Russia does. So it's not really that much of a competitor. Norway is not really cutting into the capitalist profits that much. I mean, it might some, but not compared to Russia. I mean, look at Russia. Look how big it is. Russia used to be the top natural gas producer in the world, the top oil producer in the world, and now the United States is because of fracking. All right. Split in Europe over USA and Russia. Well, at this point, I mean, all of the major European countries, there's got to be a lot of people there saying, what are we getting out of this? All right, the USA is taking us to the brink of World War III. What do we gain from this? What's in it for us? There's got to be a lot of them that are saying that. What do we get out of this? What do we benefit from this? That's got to be pretty widespread. Oh, thank you for the tip. It's much appreciated, Red Precarian. There's got to be a lot of them that are saying, what's in it for us? And the Germans, I mean, they've been screwed. I mean, the Nord Stream 2 pipeline has been built and it's not turned on yet. And now Biden's talking about new sanctions. And the French, it seems like they're not fully on board with the USA attacks on Russia. And that look, I mean, the British and the Americans want to dominate the oil and gas markets. They don't want Russia to emerge as a strong, alternative, just like they wanted China to stay poor, just like they want to dominate the world. And they especially have concerns about the oil and gas markets. But yeah, a lot of mainstream, a lot of mainland European countries don't go along with it. And it's not in their economic interest. It's not in the economic interest of the Germans to fight with the Russians. We've seen these differences around nuclear power, around other issues. The British and the American oil bankers dominate the world with their control of oil and gas. And that's why fusion energy is so important. That's why China is all about fusion energy. So there you go. All right, folks, this is the first night I've streamed on Rockfin. It's certainly been an interesting experience, but I will certainly do it again. We're going to do a show exclusively on Rockfin very soon. But yeah, I'm glad we're on the Rockfin platform now. But we're also on Facebook and we're also on YouTube, and we're doing the best we can. We're building, we're growing, we're expanding. And the way we always end every show, if you're new, you wouldn't know this, but the way we always end every show is a new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, the people of all countries must get prepared. Revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. And on that note, folks, I'm going to say good night.